So you found yourself a piece of land and you're thinking, wow, what a great deal. Well, this could cost you a lot more than you anticipated. It's a lot more than the sticker price. So today we're going to be talking about the most expensive mistakes people make when they're purchasing a piece of land, so that way you're not losing a lot of this. Nobody wants to lose this. I don't want to lose this. Do you want to lose this? No. So let's go ahead and make sure you don't. One of the smallest pieces of land in the United States is in New York City, and it's not much larger than a slice of pizza. A lot of times when people have a piece of property they've had for quite some time, they usually have some kind of survey on hand. And if you're buying a cheap piece of land and you're wanting to cut costs, you're thinking, well, I'll just go ahead and take the seller's survey and go from there. The problem is sometimes when people have these surveys, they're either outdated or not correct, or sometimes I've even had it where they gave them a survey to another property that happened to be next door, and it wasn't even the property they were purchasing, which didn't come up until title search. This is one of those things. Don't go cheap. Go ahead and get yourself a survey for yourself before you purchase this piece of land. In some areas, in some states, they require you to get a survey no matter what piece of property you're getting, but in other areas, they do not require that. Irrelevant. Go ahead and get yourself a survey and pay for that yourself. It seems like a high upfront cost, but it's going to end up saving you thousands, especially when you go in to put in things like fencing and your concrete pad for your own house. That way you can also know where the setbacks are on the piece of property. Even though that you have a survey and it shows the setbacks, you want to get a new updated survey as well, so that way you are 100% sure. Before you start pouring concrete and putting up fencing, nothing's worse than having to take all that down because you didn't have a proper survey. So what is a survey exactly? A survey is a process used to identify a property's corners, points, or pins and measure the distance between them. These points are used to create boundaries for ownership and land maps. Depending on the type of survey you get, residential or commercial, it can show roads, structures, utility easements, creeks, fences, encroachments, and many other things that you might not initially see on the property. Now you're probably wondering who actually pays for the survey when it comes to a piece of land, because you're thinking, well, the seller should probably pay for it since they own that piece of land. Well, here's the thing. If you're purchasing it, it's on you. The buyer generally pays for the survey, but that survey belongs to you as well. And it will be with you until the day you decide to sell it, and you can decide if you want to give it to the next buyers. And of course, I would advise those same buyers to go ahead and get a new survey. This is a very important thing to have ahead of time because you don't want to make an expensive mistake. A lot of times when surveys, especially on older pieces of property, there's been things that have been done to that piece of land that nobody even knows about. Sometimes it's been passed along through families and generations for so long that they had no idea that there was ever structures on there. And sometimes, you know, like those old movies, like an old Indian burial ground.
An ancient Indian what?
Yeah, those things are important. And then if you're building a house and you didn't have the proper survey and you go to do your soil samples, well, then you might find out that there's like an old Indian burial ground.
Left the bodies and you only moved the headstones! You only moved the headstones!
Underneath your piece of land. So again, very important to have that survey done. And knowing what kind of survey you need to have done is equally as important. Unfortunately, if you're a buyer, you're going to be the one that has to pay for it. Real estate may be expensive in California, but you still can get some cheap land for $8,000 in San Bernardino, California. Sometimes the cost isn't necessarily monetarily. It could be emotionally as well. Just recently I had somebody that purchased a piece of property and they were so excited because it was literally, there wasn't anybody around and it was covered in trees. But what they didn't know is the property behind them was about to be turned into a subdivision. 6 months later, they start hearing this bulldozers come in and their little quiet sanctuary is now a really loud mess. So when you're purchasing a piece of land, make sure there isn't other planning of zoning or anything else, any new construction that's going to happen to the property behind your property. That way you can keep that peace of mind. That, or just go ahead and purchase the property behind you too, so that way you don't have to worry about it. In most cases, most people can't do that, but it's always good to do a very good investigation because you don't want to have that emotional expense of getting tied into a piece of property that you really liked, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's turned into a loud nightmare of a loud subdivision and not the privacy that you intended when you purchased it in the first place. Although home prices have skyrocketed in Arizona, you can buy this 10-acre lot for $15,900 in Apache County, Arizona. What a deal! Trees, glorious trees. I love them, they're beautiful, but a lot of times when you're buying a piece of property to have a house put on it, believe it or not, and it's really sad, they have to take out every single tree. And a lot of times when you try to save those trees, once the heavy equipment gets over your piece of land, it ends up killing the root system and ends up killing your trees anyways, and it costs you even more to have them removed later on. When you're going to have your lot cleared, find out how much it would actually cost to have it fully cleared ahead of time. And full bush hogging, the whole 9 yards is what we call it here in Louisiana. It's a bush hogging. I know it sounds so sad, but if you're planning on pouring some concrete and putting in your new house, most of the time all the trees around that area are going to have to go. You're going to really definitely want to budget for that ahead of time, because if you don't, it can cost you a lot more than you were anticipating, a lot more. Typical tree removal after you've built a house can cost up to $10,000 depending on the size of the tree. So sometimes if you're trying to save these trees, it may end up costing you a lot in the end.
The biggest purchase of land in the United States was the Louisiana Purchase, bought from Napoleon in France in 1803 for a whopping $15 million.
Whatever your intent is to buy a piece of land, if it includes building a house, you're definitely going to have to get a soil test ahead of time. I know it can take up to 2, 3, even up to 6 weeks to have a soil test done. Well, why would you need that done? Well, there's a couple reasons. If you're using it for residential use and you're going to need a septic system, you're going to have to find out if it's suitable to even have a septic system on the property itself. Another reason is there's this thing called a soil compaction test for pouring things like a foundation on the property too. So you're going to have this done prior to signing on the dotted line, because the property you're buying may not be suitable for either one of those things. It just might just be a piece of dirt. But that could work out as a good thing. If they own other pieces of property around there and that specific lot isn't good for either a septic system or to build a house on, maybe you could buy the one next door that belongs to them as well, and then buy this one at a major discount because it's unusable. Then you got twice the dirt for half the money.
Another super inexpensive place to buy land is in Klamath County, Oregon. You can get this 8-acre lot for $5,900.
So one of the most expensive things that happens on a piece of property is getting a septic system. I would strongly suggest meeting with somebody that is experienced in putting in septic systems to get a rundown of that specific cost for that particular piece of property. Sometimes it isn't as expensive as you originally thought, but other times it can cost you a lot more because of the way that they have to mitigate the water to go through the septic system or to get to the drainage out to the ditch. Have that budgeted ahead of time, because you don't want something that you plan to only cost like $6,000 to cost $15,000 because of some kind of old leach field or whatever might happen. Have an expert go out there first before you sign on the dotted line, because it could cost you a lot of money.
In Costa County, Colorado, you could buy this over 3-acre lot for $19,500.
While you're having that septic system looked at, you might as well have them look at putting in a well too. If you're not going to be able to connect to city water and sewage, you're going to have to find out how much it's going to cost to have a well put down. You may not be able to put a well down where you were intending to. Maybe the well might have to be exactly where you're planning on putting the house. So when you're having your septic system done, see if they can go ahead and tell you where your well needs to be as well. Your well needs to be as well? Yes, your well needs to be as well. I still can't say it. Your well needs to be done as well. You know what I mean. You want to be able to get fresh water. You want it to be in the right place, and you don't want it to be where your house is going to be built. So find that out ahead of time before you sign on the dotted line to buy your piece of land.
So if you take all the expenses that you've had with the land so far, if you bought a 5-acre lot for about $5,000, you got the topical land survey, that'd be $650. The tree removal would be about $3,000 to $5,000, but we're going to average it out to about $4,000. The bush hocking would cost you about $100 per acre. The geo report between $3,000 to $5,000. The elevation certificate would be about $600. The well could cost you $3,000 to $15,000. A sewer could cost you about $1,000 to about $5,000, averaging the cost to about $24,000 for that $5,000 lot. Now, if you're going to connect your water and sewer to a city, that can cost you about $5,000 to $20,000 to connect to a city sewer line.
Buying a piece of land in the United States is exciting, especially when you get it for cheap. You just got to make sure you do your due diligence ahead of time. And I have a good way for you to do due diligence ahead of time, and that's a friend of mine's book, She actually wrote this. It's like the Bible of buying land. I'll go ahead and put a link in the description to her book. It's awesome. If you want to watch some more videos about buying land, go ahead and click this one right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters.